Ukraine. And of course, important talks taking place today in Saudi with the Russians, the Americans and the Russians, to talk about possibility of a ceasefire, but still extremely delicate. This was how the BBC News was reporting it. Trump envoy, and they're talking about Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. He dismisses Starmer plan for Ukraine. Now, I'm just going to pop this little bit of video on screen because this is in the article. Before we get to video, this was another article that was talking about that interaction. And essentially, Witkoff had criticised Starmer, accusing him of being simplistic and unrealistic in his own, in Starmer's own provision for a possible ceasefire. And he also said that he was posing. So, and a poser comes from Witkoff. It doesn't come from the UK column. But this is the backdrop that the BBC used, and I've put it into black and white so that we can get a better sense of what's going on here. But here is the leader, Keir Starmer, in front of British military personnel. Of course, they're looking to him with absolute awe and admiration as he talks about what he wants to do. And what does he want to do? He wants more money, he wants more weapons, he wants more munitions, more drones. And of course, the British government has effectively said it will fight on the Russian front to the last Ukrainian. So it appears that if you vote for New Labour, you're going to get a new Führer as well. And Keir Starmer is the man. Just compare that headline with, of course, what he's been saying about the need for massive cuts to the civil service. So we've got to cut the civil service by 15% at least in order to save money. Where is the money going? It's going to pay for weapons in Ukraine and munitions. And of course, if you go to the gov.uk website, we can see some of the figures here. It's small print, but they're talking about 7.8 billion in military support and 5 billion in what they say is non-military support. And we compare the two of what we've got for the benefit of people in this country and fighting war. Now, the other thing that's happening is, of course, on the world stage, we've got headlines like this. The UK has apparently been handed a leadership role in Ukraine to pull together a defence group of maybe 50 nations. So I just wanted to comment somewhat cynically on that. We can't run the country. The government can't run the military itself. It can't run the NHS. It can't fill in the potholes in the road. But apparently, under New Labour, we're world leader for 50 nations to prosecute a war. And if we stay on the subject of manipulation of people and applied psychology, no better place to go than the BBC again. This was part of their report this morning on what was happening. US-Russia officials holding Ukraine talks in Saudi as Russian drone attacks continue. Now, this is BBC spin because it's basically accusing the Russians of continuing a drone war unnecessarily. And this was the video that I mentioned earlier. If we just let it play, I'm not going to play the sound because you just hear a little bit of gunshot as some up there. We can see some tracer going up into the sky as some form of air defense in Kiev tries to stop the Russian drones coming in. But if you compare this shot with the scenes of absolute carnage in Gaza, for instance, very little is happening here. But the narrative by the BBC is to suggest that it's only the nasty Russians that are using the drones, and they're doing so on populated areas. But if we do look across UK media reports, this one was a very telling one for the Times in the last couple of the days. Key statement, unseen by the world, British equipment, including drones, have played a central role in Ukraine's new offensive, and British personnel have been closely advising the Ukrainian military on a scale matched by no other country. So this is an admission that we have been prosecuting the war. And if we stay on the subject of drones, really encourage people to go to dronewars.net, where a gentleman called Chris Cole has written this really excellent article looking at who is building drones. And it's mixed in with Lord of the Rings. If you look at Anduril here, the entrepreneur Palmer Luckey is very excited because he's got big contracts for his drones, but it's all really a bit of Lord of the Rings. It's nothing to do with slaughtering people.
And he's wearing flip-flops.
And he's wearing flip-flops, and of course he's a very happy man. But this is another quote from that article from a company called Helsing, a company set up by 3 AI experts in Berlin, and its website states that it was, quote, founded to put ethics at the core of defence technology development and insist that artificial intelligence will be the key capability to keep liberal democracies from harm. I found that a fascinating statement, and we'll do more on that. But let's have a look at this, because amongst the mainstream media reports, there was talk about cross-party groups being briefed on not only what our government said is to happen in Ukraine, but also on how wonderful the Ukrainian administration is. When I went looking for this information, I could only find a report that had come from north of the border. So I'm going to say here that, unknown to the UK public at large, Ukraine is burying itself into UK politics via secretive cross-party working groups. Now, we haven't got time to take you through all of the minutes, and if you look, this is from February 2024, but essentially our MPs seem to be spending more time in helping prosecute the war in Ukraine than they do sorting out the vaccine-damaged people in UK. And for completeness, I'll just add up the second part of that so that you are able to freeze the screen and you can look at the detail. But these are clearly meetings where the UK public is being told very little indeed. And what happens as a result of this type of cross-party meeting with Ukraine and Ukrainian officials? Well, we get more excited people here, as detailed by this standard report, that the British man running the Ukraine drone factory is calling for UK government funds after MP visit. And this is the reality of what is going on. We've got MPs visiting Ukraine, deciding on policy, never debated in Parliament, and never really discussed in any detail in front of the UK public. So no money for this country, no money for the NHS, for the roads, for the schools, but we have got plenty of money to get the drone production going for weapons and munitions for Ukraine. And if you voted for New Labour, that is what you voted for, and Keir Starmer is going to give us more of the same. Ben, there's more of this stuff going on under the surface, except you're coming in at the angle that this is to do with government and big business.
Indeed.